How did you first hear about them? What was the city?
Sure.
And then how did you know that, that they were going to be important?
There was a little label called Megaforce Records in New Jersey, run by Johnny Z and his wife Marcia. They had put out a couple of independent records. The three that they wanted me to hear, because I worked at a major label and they needed major distribution, was Raven, Anthrax, and Metallica. I listened to all three of the records. Johnny Z thought Raven were going to be the biggest band in the whole world. I gave him $5,000. They gave me back 5 songs. They were effing great. But the problem was I heard Kill 'Em All. And that totally blew my mind and changed my world.
And that was the album they had recorded on this independent label.
That is correct.
And what year is this?
They might have recorded in 82, but I started at Elektra in 83. Okay. Now, they were under contract. So I knew that I didn't want to sign those other 2 bands or anything else that was in that stack of very fine records that John sent me, but I had to have Metallica in my life. I knew I had to be very delicate about it because it was about contractual obligations that they had there. And so quietly once on a trip, I went to the Stone in San Francisco. I saw Metallica, but I actually saw them previous in Brooklyn at L'Amour, but I wasn't working at a record company yet. So I saw them in 83. I flipped out. I thought James, their singer, was the most charismatic person I've ever seen on stage. Ever. No, there's Bon Scott from AC/DC. I mean, there are those great people, Paul Rodgers from Bad Company, but James is, 21 years old and he's full of piss and vinegar and that hair and those teeth. And, I embarrass him by probably saying half of this, but he's extraordinary. He's an extraordinary animal on the stage. So I knew I had to have these people in my life. I gave Lars my business card and I just went about my business. They didn't call me, I didn't call them.
And Lars was the
drummer, but he was kind of the
business guy.
Yeah, yes, right. Indeed.
And the scene, what was going on with metal at the time?
Oh, it was crazy. We were all going to L'Amour's in Brooklyn, and there were places in Staten Island and New Jersey, Brooklyn, which was where L'Amour was. Back in the day, there was a very crazy, important heavy metal scene. It was coming out of the woodwork everywhere, from overseas, from San Francisco, from New York City. But just to fast forward to finish up what you were asking me, I knew I had to have Metallica in my life.
In your life.
In my life. So
this was like
music is my life.
Right. So this is a personal, well, not personal, this is like, you had to do this. This wasn't business.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, of course, it turns into business.
Right.
Naturally, because it has to. But I knew I had to have these people on Elektra and in my life. And so Lars called me and said, we're coming to play Roseland as part of a triple act bill, and it's a Megaforce night. Will you come? I said, absolutely. I invited our head of radio, Mike Bone. I invited Bob Krasnow, our chairman, and they both came to the gig. I don't really remember at the time what they thought.
And what was Roseland? Is it still there?
I'm sorry. Roseland was a venue that had been on 52nd Street for 50 years. Now, I'll get into that in 1 minute. I go to that show, they blow my mind. I go backstage and I say, you guys we have to work this out. You have to be on Elektra. You need a major label. This is gonna blow up so big, you're not even gonna know what to do. So the next day they were in my office and in the conference room, I ordered beer and Chinese food and it felt like they never left. Johnny Z, who ran Megaforce, was furious with me. But in the end, money talks, and the settlement was big. He got points, I believe, on the next 2 albums. And that night, Raven got signed to Atlantic Records. Anthrax got signed to Island Records. So, in the end, everybody won. And that was a beautiful thing.
Wow. And the Chinese food and the beers, and they just...
I think that helps cinch the deal.
Right, but they liked your vibe, and they liked
my vibe.
Because that's important, right?
Well, yes, and I think maybe I was 2 years older than them, so if I'm 24 and they're 21 and 22, they were like, this is an A&R. They thought an A&R person should look like a suit and tie, but I was anything but that. I was a kid from Brooklyn who managed to get an A&R gig. And I felt like I was gonna be great at it. And don't you think, this is the second band that I signed, is Metallica. And then after that, that changes the landscape of rock and roll. It changed the landscape, what other record companies were looking for. Because they wanted to find their own Metallica. That doesn't happen. But there are versions of heavy metal bands that are extraordinary out there. And the example I always use is Slayer. One of a kind, extraordinary. They don't sound like anybody, and nobody sounds like them. They're a band that I wish I could have worked with, but instead, whenever they're in the tri-state area, I never miss a show.